Okay, so welcome to today's brown bag lunch, everybody. I'm just going to hit captions. There we go. I'm Beth and I'm from the Canna Network support team. Please introduce yourselves in the chat while I get started. So before we kickstart this BBL, I'd like to acknowledge that we are all living and working on stolen Aboriginal land. I'm lucky enough to live on and work on the land of the beautiful Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. When you're introducing yourselves in the chat, please acknowledge the country that you're on as well and your organisations. So this BBL is from Citizens Climate Lobby Australia, and in its new guise as a grassroots climate policy think tank, it has published two playbooks, one on policy and the other on lobbying. They are designed as a resource to any one group or organisation to assist their efforts to build political will for effective climate policy in Australia. This BBL explores and explains the playbooks and how they can be accessed and their contents adopted and implemented in your organisations. We have Joyce, Rod and Val presenting today. Joyce is the WA Regional Coordinator for CCL, and she advocates for effective bipartisan market-based solutions for climate change. She believes that engaging with democracy is the best way to create meaningful change in our current system. Rod is the founding chair of CCL in Australia, and over the last 8 years has guided its development into the grassroots policy and lobbying think tank as it is today. With a background in community development, training and counselling, he is a keen advocate for clear, rational policies to address climate change at its primary source, which is greenhouse gas emissions, and to build strong relationships to influence policymakers. Val is a registered occupational therapist who sees a clear link between climate change, physical and mental health. Val is upping the ante from personal action to advocating for systems change by setting a worldwide fee on carbon emissions at the source. So that's all from me. I'll hand over to Rod.
Thank you very much, Beth. Thank you all for attending. I'm speaking to you from the land of the Bibliman people of southwestern Australia. I acknowledge that they've taken wonderful care of this land for a very long time, and I am inspired to try and do the same. I also want to introduce Pam from Citizens Climate Lobby, who didn't get an intro because she's a ring into today's presentation, but we'll say a bit more about her when we get started. So thank you for all attending. This is a really important thing for us because we've been working on these playbooks for over 6 months now, and we're really excited now to be able to share them more broadly. And we hope that they'll be a wonderful resource for many people within the movement and beyond. So we're going to start with Joyce, who's the regional coordinator here in Western Australia. She's going to just give us some background, and then she has a much more important task to do, and that is to attend her granddaughter's school assembly. So over to you, Joyce.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here to talk a little bit about CCL Australia and where it is at the moment. So I'd just like to give a bit of context to all of that. It started with Marshall Saunders, an American who was working to alleviate poverty in South America about 15 years ago now, and he saw an inconvenient truth and realised that the work that he was doing was not going to, could be for naught if the climate was going to be changing as radically as we are anticipating. So he went back to the US and he started CCL as a way to get everyday people to speak to their MPs about climate solutions. And when he started advocating for carbon pricing, he said, for the first time, I feel as if I've found a solution that is a match for the problem that we face. So Rod Mitchell then brought the same thinking to Australia in 2014. He liked the values, the CCL values of respect and gratitude and generosity and appreciation. And he also liked the fact that it's relationships-based and solutions-focused. So what we see now in CCL Australia is because we asked ourselves, how does a small organisation like ours best leverage its talent and its experience? So bringing in someone new has helped provide that objectivity that we needed. So thanks to Will Dable from Monash University, Will and Rod got together and they reevaluated the organisation's capabilities and its possible future, and realised that we had a lot of knowledge about climate policy and about lobbying. So then getting that out to others was where we should be. So then the think tank idea was born. Think tank, according to the description, is it's something that provides advice and ideas about specific political and economic problems. So that's our aim now, to share what we've learned over the past 8 years about, firstly, carbon pricing as the best means to reduce emissions, and secondly, about using democracy to lobby for better environmental outcomes for us all. Another part of the new CCL is that we've made the decision to become more targeted in our lobbying efforts. We ask ourselves which MPs will get us closer to our goals, and we have a well-trained lobbying team ready to meet with them and also to mentor other CCL members who are keen to do the same thing. And this present political situation, which we all know about, is that we have a potentially progressive government, seemingly still, though, captive to vested interests, moving very slowly and adopting piecemeal policies. We want to support it, find the courage to move away from the craziness of the present economic system, which incentivises all the wrong things, and towards comprehensive, effective policy that will decarbonise Australia quickly. So turning now to the sharing aspect, gathering all this information and experiences that we have gained since 2014 into Playbooks was a masterstroke. Until then, everything was in people's heads and inaccessible to others. Rod and a few other CCLs have written about many aspects of putting a price on pollution, which is basically what we advocate for. And the result is these two playbooks, one devoted to carbon pricing as a climate policy and the other devoted to how best to advocate for that policy. Rod will talk about the playbooks in more detail and explain how they can help us communicate effectively and contribute to climate discussions and debate here in Australia. So then with that, I'd like to hand back to Rod. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. That's great. I'll go back to the screen. So, as Joyce mentioned, I've been guiding the organisations over the last 8 or 9 years since I discovered CCL when I was on a trip to Vancouver. And it's evolved since then, but we're still part of an international network of citizens' climate lobbies, which is growing fast in Africa and is very active in Europe and North America in particular. So here we are now as a policy and lobbying think tank, and we have a clear goal, that is to get a fair, efficient and effective price on carbon enshrined in law. We know that's a big ask, but given the way carbon pricing has been demonized in recent years, but we still recognize that it's a very, very important part of the policy piece and it needs to be there. Some people have said, and I think it's probably true, is that carbon pricing is inevitable, but it's really important that we get the best one we possibly can. And in some ways, the safeguard mechanism is a return to carbon pricing, albeit possibly an inadequate one, as has been discussed right now across the movement. So how we want to do this is to develop and share rational policies, climate policies, with as many people as possible. And we build that political will for those policies to be adopted by citizen lobbying. And as Joyce mentioned, we do our own direct lobbying, but we're also keen to support other organisations in their lobbying, so that we can reach the people who have the power to influence the legislation. Just some of the operational ways we go about this is, so we've been, the last 6 months, we've been, or maybe a bit longer, we've been writing up these policies and putting them in the playbooks. So that's having a library of resources that all our members can use, but also anyone anywhere can use is really important. And as Joyce mentioned, a carbon price is kind of central to it. Climate dividends, we call it climate dividends, which I'll explain in a minute, is our central policy pillar. We will lobby in as targeted as fashion as possible, but very importantly, we have an active lobbying support team who provide training and support to anyone who's lobbying within CCL, but some of that can be extended to other organisations as well. And very importantly, growing community support for a price on carbon is obviously critical to enabling the government to move in that direction. How we're organised is quite simply, we have a few national teams that are organising the playbooks themselves, the resources, but also providing the training and the lobbying support team. We encourage local self-organising groups to use these resources. They can be CCL groups, but also I'll mention later that any group can self-organise around these resources as they wish. And very, very importantly, and that's why we're here today, is to encourage allies, that is, other climate organisations, or not necessarily climate organisations, who have concerns in this area to use the resources. So that's the simple background to it. So now going to the playbooks, and you'll see at the bottom there, and I'll put these in the chat now. There are three links there. The first one is the lobbying playbook. The second is the policy playbook. The third is a blog, which I will be sharing with you shortly. But I'll just put these in the chat first so that you have access to them. So I'll just actually, I'll do that a bit later because I'm a bit tied up with the screen yet. Oh, great. Thanks, Beth. Okay, so the playbook has been put together by a number of people. And I first want to acknowledge Josephine, who's center of screen now. She's Josephine Auer. She's just won a Rhodes Scholarship, and she's an economist, economics student, and active economist in Queensland and Sydney. She would have been with us today, but she's actually on a plane to the United States because she's been headhunted by all the Ivy League colleges in the US to see if they can get her after she finishes her Rhodes Scholarship. So that's her number one on the list there. Warwick Smith is one of our members. He's an economist and an ecologist. He's been very helpful. Joyce, you've met. Dennis Angove is an atmospheric chemist, and he's one of our directors. He's been writing too. We have Jennifer Delmar, editorial styling, and Will Dable, who was our CEO last year, our executive officer for about 10 months, who helped us to set this all up. That was really great. And then the lobbying playbook, which just comes next, is Bill Shute and other members of the training team, including Pam Pitt, who you'll hear from her in a minute, and a few other people all contributed to that. So we've got quite a team helping out here. So, starting with the policy playbook, we've divided into 4 chapters or 4 parts so that people can find their way around it. And so what I'll do now is I'll go actually into the playbook itself. So when you open the playbook, that's what you'll find first. And a brief introduction there, and then those 4 parts I'm showing here, and you can go into each. You can open up each one of those, and read your way through whatever articles grab your attention or seem most relevant to your particular interest. And then all of those articles are just listed here in the order in which they were written or produced or published on the website. So, so for instance, this latest one here is looking at how carbon pricing can radically affect plastic pollution, and so putting forward a solution in that area is really important. more topical right now is our response to the proposed safeguard reforms. So that was last month's one, but further down we also have it's amazing how long ago it was, how many we've written, but further down there's an article on the safeguard mechanism, but also we have our response to the initial consultation about the safeguard mechanism. We've also written about the climate trigger, the effects on climate security, why we recommend a dividend in the carbon price that we propose, which I'll explain again in a minute, and some background information, for instance, about humanity's fossil fuel addiction, which is clearly a driver of some of what's happening. So that gives you a sense of what's in the policy playbook, and hopefully we've set it out reasonably clearly in these four sections, so that you can go where you think you need to go at whatever stage of learning or interest you're at. We see it as a self-paced resource that people who join CCL initially can find their way through this and then access some of the training resources later, which Pam will be talking about. So that's the policy playbook. What I'll now do is I'll pass on to Pam, who's going to show us through the lobbying playbook. Over to you, Pam.
Hi, everyone. First of all, just wanted to mention that, yes, I'm part of the training team. There are 5 of us on the training team. Our goal is to help you with whatever resources that you need. We've done lots of different training in the past. We've had lots of webinars. We've had sessions where we've mimicked a lobbying session, for example, and helped people to feel a bit more at ease about the process of going through lobbying. So the playbooks are just another angle on the training to help you. The idea is that it's supposed to be something that's quite easy to read and easy to work your way through. Please reach out to us. There's 5 of us, so we're keen to help you. So if there's anything that you need training on, let us know and we will organise it. We just need your enthusiasm to guide us as to what you would like. All right, so in my screen, I just wanted to show you, first of all, on the website, how to find your way into the playbooks themselves. So this is our home screen. So if you don't have the link to be able to find your way through to the right section, you can just come into the main screen. I'm just struggling because I've got multiple things on my screen. And if you scroll down here to this lovely photo of Mr. Albanese, and where you see learn how easy it is to lobby. If you click on that, then that takes you into a page which is about lobbying. And when you scroll down there, it gives you a little bit of an intro. And then here you are, you've got read our how to lobby guides in the lobbying playbook. So when you click on that, again, there's a little bit of an introduction. It talks about the main types of lobbying that we deal with. So we've got a section here with a little bit of resources on why lobbying matters. If you open it up, just gives you a little bit of an intro there. Teaming up, which is really just about how you can work in a group to develop your lobbying session. So when you lobby, if you're meeting with an MP, normally you lobby with a group of other people, and we talk about the roles and we talk about organising it. Then there's a section about how to meet with your MP, how to organise it in the first place, how to get it in place, because it's not the easiest thing to actually get a meeting organised. Then how to have a successful meeting. So if I open that up, you can see that there's quite a lot of information here about getting them, having a successful meeting. And there's a few links as well to other information here to help you. And then if you continue down, follow up afterwards, etc. Right, I'll just minimize that so that I can go back to, there we go. And then other ways to lobby. So other ways to lobby, we'd be talking there about lobbying on social media, lobbying at grassroots level, lobbying at higher levels with the grass tops. And then again, if you scroll right down, you'll see that we've got the articles broken into political lobbying, grassroots lobbying, and grass tops lobbying. And then again, if you go a bit further down, you'll see that we've got all the articles there from A to Z that you can work your way through. So again, it's up to you. We've put this together for you, so we really hope that you'll make use of it. It's been a lot of work, and it's only successful if you guys use it. If there's anything else that you want us to write on or present on, as I said before, let us know. Okay, back to Rod. Rod, are you next?
Thank you, Pam. Yes, that's great.
I'll just stop my share.
So just to say a little bit more about our policy, just to give you a sense of what it's all about. Am I screen sharing at the moment?
No.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we favour a carbon price as a means to get emissions down quickly and efficiently. And we've advocated a policy called climate dividends. And just to give you a quick picture of how it works, we have one of our members develop this graphic as a way of describing it. And starting at the left here, what we're seeking to address is, first of all, massive subsidies that currently go to fossil fuels. It's estimated at over $50 billion a year from, if we include the implicit subsidies as well as the explicit subsidies. The Australian Institute identified $11 billion annual subsidies that are explicit, but additional to that, the IMF has identified another 50 billion that are essentially the costs of fossil fuel pollution that are not included in the price. So those subsidies are, of course, perverse and are encouraging and supporting fossil fuels and encouraging our use of fossil fuels. So the first thing we do is we put a steadily rising price or predictably rising price on the price on those emissions. And what that does is effectively transforms those subsidies and the emissions into climate dividends for every household, because the fee component of the price is returned to households, all Australian households, as a dividend monthly, which then enables those households to spend on the low carbon economy. Naturally, they choose to spend on increasingly cheaper low carbon activities and start to avoid the increasingly more expensive high carbon activities as the price kicks in. And this in turn encourages businesses and industry to further decarbonize, which then creates a virtuous cycle that keeps on driving down fossil fuel emissions. So that's a simple description of how carbon dividends works, but also climate dividends works. But it's actually deliberately simple, because we are very aware that one of the problems with climate policy is that so much of it is very complicated and deliberately complicated so that we don't understand it. A simple, comprehensive policy like this is going to be much more effective. And I just want to share my favorite graph, which comes from one of those Playbook articles. This is a graph from the IMF, which shows how a carbon price this is on global emissions, would have this blue dotted line is how a global carbon price would drive down emissions globally, just on its own, without all some of the other policies that need to be adopted as well. So if you want to know more about that, there's an article in the Playbook about it. And I just want to add one more thing too, and that is to mention Wisps of Clarity. That's a blog that I'm writing, that a few other people contribute to occasionally, but what it's designed to do is to respond to current events that are happening, such as the safeguard mechanism, but other things as well, and relate them back to the playbooks, so that way there's a some relevance going on. And again, I can show you quickly what the. So that's simply, there it is. So, for instance, the latest article is showing that a carbon price is a clear pathway out of the government's current hole. So clearly, the government's backed itself into a bit of a corner at the moment with its safeguard, and it's not looking too good. But also another one suggesting that the safeguard needs a complementary policy, and that a carbon price would be that complementary policy that would enable a lot of the problems that are being identified with the safeguard to be overcome very quickly. So in that way, we can respond to current news items and relate them back to the playbooks. And okay, so I'm now going to hand over to Val, so I'll stop sharing, because she's a fairly recent member of CCL who's done a great job building a local group, and she's done it. She started it prior to the writing of these playbooks, but she's now going to sort of tell us a little bit about how she built her local group, and also how the playbooks could assist in future. Over to you, Val.
Thanks, Rod. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so thanks for including me to talk about my sort of small local story, and hopefully it's got some relevance to a lot of you here, thinking of you know, how you can incorporate this knowledge into what you're currently doing, either as an individual or within a group or organisation. So my story is, I'm currently living on the land of the Gadigal people, which is in Sydney. And just up the road is a housing commission block where Anthony Albanese grew up with a single mum, and he's my federal MP. So that's where I sit. Years ago, I also saw An Inconvenient Truth, and that really stuck with me, the graphs, the science, looking into the future, where we were heading. It was a very influential demonstration of climate change, and that stuck with me. And I started becoming a bit more focused on my own initiatives. So joining a local organic co-op, taking my own containers to fill, built a compost bin in the back, recycled as much as possible, mended clothes, you know, all of that. And some years ago Sydney was surrounded by bushfires, and we were breathing in the smoke of the fires. And I was thinking, look, all of my mended clothes is really not making much difference, you know, in the big picture. So I thought, how can I up the ante and do a bit more? Approached the local hospital and said, can I join your Green Committee? Because I'd seen a show on TV by the Chaser team where they looked at the huge impact that hospitals had on carbon emissions, and how one hospital in particular in Queensland had managed to make some big changes and reduce their emissions very strategically. So I asked if I could join my locals committee. They said, we don't have one, but we'd love one. Can you please start it? So suddenly I was sort of thrown into the role that I hadn't expected, where I had to look at the organisation, what the executive doing, you know, what their current policies were, what advantages there were to the hospital, etc. So I put a lot of work into helping them set up some changes. It made very little difference. The hospital was so, you know, ingrained and obviously dedicated to saving lives, and environmental initiatives were always sort of lost at the back. You know, it didn't actually make that big change for the amount of effort that we were putting into it. So then somehow, and it might have been a meeting like this, I came across CCL, Citizens Climate Lobby, and got the impression that it was a good match for me. I had previously been in the Stop Adani mine convoy. I'd helped politicians, you know, I'd sort of tried to do my bit, but this group seemed to be a good match, and it's very community-based, very friendly. It's non-partisan. You're supporting your local represented members at different levels, local, state and federal, developing relationships with them, which I find really interesting, using the networks you've already got, linking in with experts like the people that Rod's listed as authors of the playbooks. So I thought, yeah, okay, I'll look into this a bit more, and got a couple of my local friends who I knew were interested in environmental initiatives as well, just over, you know, chats at dinner. And we were lucky enough to, this is April, May last year, we were given a series of training sessions by Rod and Pam and some of the more established CCL members, who explained that CCL is an international organisation. We focus on the fee on carbon, so it's pretty simple. I didn't have to think about, you know, every part of climate change, just focus on that, get to understand it better. They explained that there's 5 levers of political will. So one of those is the lobbying, which Rod's talked about a lot. One is looking at grassroots impact, and we were supported to run tabling sessions, you know, at local fairs, say, where we talk about climate change, we talk about fee on carbon, we support people to write to the local MPs. So we've done that, so that's grassroots. Then there's a grass tops approach, where you try and find influential people within your local networks or local political environment. So we've been developing relationships with our local council, for instance, as grass tops, getting them to encourage federal government to take on the fee on carbon. We've been engaging with state government MPs. My little group's got an invitation to go to New South Wales Parliament after the next election. So that's a cross-parties invitation to talk about fee on carbon and show a model that we've discovered recently, the En-ROADS model, which explains in scientific detail how important a fee of carbon is and how different people can introduce that at their level. We were taught how to develop your group. So my group of 3, which was myself and my 2 friends doing the course, spotted another couple of people in the training session who we thought were like-minded and lived quite locally. So we said, do you want to join our group? And they did. So we've now got a group of 9 people, and we meet every week at my home. We have a dinner before the meeting for those that want to come to that. Some people Zoom in, but we've been able to maintain that weekly meeting for close to a year now. And to contribute to the momentum, we're constantly calling on people like Rod to come and give a little talk, an update. We'll review a latest playbook, we'll review a latest blog article that's been released within CCL Australia. And we've slowly been educating ourselves about the way to have the greatest impact to fight climate change. What else can I say about the playbooks and now? Oh, I guess in my field of work, which is in disability health as a therapist, I was used to having a team around me, a strong team, and generally I had friendships in that team. And that momentum has carried over into my climate activism by having the CCL group and support from the wider CCL network internationally. So I found that really helpful. Something else I had in my work was, as a practice leader in my field, I was advising the Disability Minister and the Ombudsman in New South Wales and supporting the practice of hundreds of occupational therapists in New South Wales by writing practice guides and continuously looking at the latest evidence, summarising it, getting it to the therapist as quickly as possible. That's what I find CCL is doing for me in my activism work, because we've got the experts from a variety of sources contributing to these practice guides or policy playbooks, or lobbying playbooks, which are living documents, so they're being updated regularly. You can contact the authors and ask them questions, chat to them, unlike textbooks, say, where it's much harder to, get to the author. So I'm finding that the support that I have in my professional career is mimicked quite well with CCL in providing the support from with the team and with the expertise, and support and advice. But generally my team of 9 are fairly autonomous, and that's what CCL encourages. You're encouraged to form your own group, and as long as you follow the core values of CCL, which is to be kind, friendly, supportive, be a really good listener, try and develop meaningful relationships across political boundaries, so that you can support our elected reps and support the grass tops influential organisations to do the best we can as a collective to fight climate change.
Thank you, Val. That's a wonderful story, and it's been wonderful watching how you and your group have flourished in the past year, and we hope to see many more as a result of this result of the playbooks. And just to finish on that section before where we go to questions, simply to say that we're very happy for these resources to be used by any group, so some groups may wish to form in a similar way to Val and actually be part of CCL and lobby in the name of CCL, but we're just as happy for groups to lobby with some other with some other identity. So, for instance, the organisations that are here today may choose to do their own lobbying, use some of these materials in their own way, and that's fine. It's simply that if people do choose to lobby as CCL, then obviously we would like some of our philosophy and approaches to be used, and for people to access our training so that it's in sync with our approach. So Beth, I guess you've been monitoring questions, so we're very happy to answer questions.
I'll start with one of mine, and thank you all for presenting today. So I was wondering about how you educate new members who aren't up to speed, but are very interested in getting engaged, that just might not have the same policy literacy as the rest of the group. Maybe that'd be for Val, or...
Well, I'll start with it, and then I think Pam would come in next as part of the training team. But the whole idea of the way we've set up our website now is that people can join CCL or just become interested in CCL and then self-pace their own education and training by going through the playbooks and other training materials, and then they can reach out at a certain point in their journey. They can reach out to the training committee and to the training team, and they will offer training as required. So it's kind of self-paced initially, and then once people have reached a point where, okay, this is really useful for us, then Pam's team will step in, and Pam, you might want to say something there.
I just agree with you, Rod. So yes, we used to initially, we would have sessions like this, Zoom sessions, where we would run people through the various stages of lobbying. But the playbooks, the idea of the playbooks is that they're written in a way that it's very easy for people to be able to follow and educate themselves. And every so often we'll offer topics. For example, we had one recently, which was a writing workshop where we got people together to talk about how to write letters to the paper, for an example. And then we sat there and actually wrote a letter together. Each person did their own and sent them off at the end of the session. So we have a variety of training strategies, but yes, we're driven by what people are asking for mainly. So that's why call out if you want anything.
That's fantastic. I know that some of our grassroots groups are interested in how to run interactive webinars and also facilitation at like a community level. Do you have any resources like that?
No, I don't think we do, but if you tell me that you want some resources put together on them, we'll do it. That's what we're here for.
Brilliant.
And I might just add something to that question as well. As I was saying, I've got 9 people in my group and only 3 of us did the training at the beginning. So as we find, actually, no, there was another couple we met in the training, as I said. So the others came in new at different stages over the last 9 months or so. So I've trained them up myself just by pointing them in the direction of really good introductory videos that are on our website to make it easier for them, you know, to decide where to focus their time at different steps and then answer their questions as they go along. And there's a lot of groups like mine around Australia that are run sort of separately, but under the umbrella of CCL Australia. So if you can link in with one of us, we'd probably be able to find a group that's local to you, or at least a state group where you've got some experienced CCL members that could give you small group training to help you catch up to everyone else.
It would be great to get a list maybe of some group coordinators so that when I share the resource around, people can have a look and see where their best contact might be if they want to start up a group. And some of our larger members have grassroots divisions too, so that might be really handy for them while writing submissions and other things.
For sure. Sounds great.
Any other questions? All right, well, you have their emails. So if you have any other questions following this webinar, please do reach out to them. Is there anything else that you speakers want to add before we wrap up?
Well, I can't resist the opportunity to say a few things. I think that what's the best way to say this? Simply that we are very open to people using our resources in any way they choose, whether they want to be closely connected to CCL or simply continuing to be part of another organisation and drawing on aspects of it. Our purpose is to advance climate policy as best we can, and I'd like to reiterate that point too about making policy as rational as possible. We are proposing an extremely rational solution to the climate crisis that is, and unfortunately, the reality in our current world is that rationality is not all that common, and consequently, there are so many compromised solutions being put forward, and there are so many half measures being proposed. There are so many piecemeal policies that in some ways we hope will add up to enough, but it's pretty obvious that they won't. So having a rational, comprehensive policy such as the climate dividends that we're proposing to provide a foundation for the decarbonising of our economy is really, really important. And we're very hopeful that other organisations will be able to make use of that policy as a means of pushing forward and getting past the seemingly stuckness in Australian policy that it seems very difficult to talk about carbon pricing anymore since the last one was abolished, and we're very happy to encourage lots and lots of discussion about the positivity of a carbon price. That's me. Pam or Val, anything you want to add? Or for that matter, Jeff Wilson is one of our members who's with us, who may have something to say.
Well, thanks, Rod. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, one of the great things about what CCL does is that it tries to take the climate issue out of politics. And so CCL talks to anyone from whatever party they come from. And at the moment, I think that we have a new government that was elected in May last year that came out with announcements that they would end the climate wars and set out to make Australia a renewable energy superpower. Unfortunately, what I see at the moment is that there is a new version of the climate wars happening between the Labor Party and the Greens. And just before this session, I came off a webinar that was hosted by the Australia Institute called The Shell Game. And I would advise anyone here to take that in, that the recording, which should be available soon, and you'll realize the extent to which the current policy that the government is pinning its hopes on is actually going to achieve the opposite results. It seems to me that the government is saying the right thing. It's talking the talk, but it's shooting itself in the foot when it tries to walk the walk. And if there's anything we can do to help the government to dissociate itself from this capture by the fossil fuel industry, I think the solution that CCL is offering, that is the climate dividend, is a clear and obvious way to do that. That is simple, effective, and will achieve the results, and at the same time will enable the community at large to be compensated for the obvious increase in costs that will happen. In other words, the community will effectively be paid to help reduce emissions. So,
thank you, Jeff, and that thoroughly supports the this article I mentioned earlier about carbon price as a clear pathway out of the government's climate hole. And something that I mentioned in that particular article is that the government would be well advised to recognise that the Parliament has a mandate to take large-scale action on climate, even if they as a party may feel that they only have their election promises to work with. But the Parliament has a much bigger mandate due to the election of 3 extra Greens and 7 climate-focused independents. Makes a big difference, and that they could benefit hugely from using that mandate rather than their much narrower mandate. But so that article addresses that issue very closely. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Well, thank you all for your contributions today. I can't wait to share some of these resources around our Canna working groups and some of our grassroots groups who have contacted me recently for submission help. So thank you so much. Yeah, I'll stop